Hey, what's up, guys? Hate that I can't be there today. Would much rather be in class than at home sick. I can promise you that. But today is another day we can get better, and I want to make sure we take advantage of it. You know, we don't have that many days before we take NWA, and I want to make sure that we grow every single point possible on that thing, and I know you guys want that too. Some of you guys have worked extremely hard over the last few months, and we don't want to waste a day, and we want to continue to do that. Which is why I wanted to make this video. I want to talk about decimals and some of the things we've been working on, talk about that worksheet from yesterday a little bit, and make sure that we can cross decimals off our list at the end of this week. We want to be able to master. I'll be there on Friday, and our so bad then is going to be master decimals. My plan is to take a grade Friday. We might push that till Monday because I've missed a couple days this week, but know that I want to be finishing up decimals. So when I think about decimals and what we've learned so far, there's really three things. There's number lines, and number two, there's fractions, and then three, there is comparing decimals. Those are the skills navs that you've seen. Those are the skills navs that you're going to see today. What's important is that we make sure we're giving our best effort when we do these quizzes, because if you don't pass this quiz, then I think you haven't learned it yet. If you don't finish the quiz, I think you haven't learned it yet, or I don't know that you're struggling. So again, if you want to grow, if you want to get the most growth points on NWA, you have to give me your best effort on Skills Navigator. So first today we're going to start with number lines. Now we've talked about this a little bit. You've seen me draw the number lines on the board, but yesterday on that worksheet you saw that we could also use grids. Now I wanted to be there in person to tell you how this would look. But I wasn't, and I think some of you guys might have been confused and hated me for a little bit. But we're going to fix that really quick here. So here we still have our number line up here, okay, and it's broken up by dimes, right? There's 10 spaces between 0 and 1. If we want to talk about our lovely grids here that we didn't get a chance to talk about while I was there, we can look at those in two different ways. Hey, pay attention. Need you to focus up here. Over here, this grid is exactly like this number line. Why? Because it has 10 spaces, okay? So when we see 10 spaces, we know we are talking about dimes. We are talking about tenths. And I hope you understand that every time I say dimes, I'm talking about tenths. I know you had to repeat that a couple times the other day, but that's just how my mind works when I always think about money. So when we look at this here, we have 10 spots. If I gave you the decimal 0.7, that is going to show 7 tenths. If we think about money, we know that there's 2 place values in money, so we would add a 0 here. That would be 70 cents or 7 dimes. All right, so here when we look at our number line, we know that we have more than 0. 70 cents is more than $0. 70 cents is also less than $1. So we would need to start here at 0, and we would need to count over 7 tenths. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There you go. All right. So I think most of you guys have got that so far. These grids, I think, threw us off. Again, I'm sorry I wasn't there. I hate being sick. But when we look at these grids, we have two options. We have this one over here that has 100 spots on it. Anytime you see a grid set up this way, it's going to have 100 little grids. For, you guessed it, 100 little pennies. So when we start thinking about money, we're looking at pennies over here, okay? Now this one has 10 spaces, we're thinking about dimes. When we're thinking about pennies, we're thinking about hundreds. When we're thinking about dimes, we're thinking about tenths, all right? So up here we have 0.70 or 7 tenths or 70 hundredths. Any way you want to look at it, it should be the same. When we look at our grids here, we have 10 spaces. We would have 7 tenths, all right? In fact, that can be written as a fraction, which we're going to talk about later, as 7 tenths. We have 7 tenths right there. We can fill in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of these bars here on this grid. 7 out of the 10, okay? Just like our fraction, just like our decimal. All three of these are telling us the same thing, 7 tenths. 7 dimes, 70 cents. If we wanted to do that over here, we could. Mrs. Keith is in there baking up a storm. She's just got all kinds of cool cooking stuff, so she's having fun while I'm teaching math over here. I'm going to go ahead and throw a different fraction at us, or a different decimal. All right, I'm going to say 0.25. We have 25 cents. You guys have heard of 25 cents plenty of times. It's a quarter, right? You're thinking, Mr. Keith, if we're going to talk about quarters, shouldn't these look a little different? We're going to stick right here with our decimals and the number lines and the grids exactly the way I've been teaching, okay? So here, we can look. We see that we go to the hundredths place. We see that our number line only has 10 spaces. Well, let's look at our tenths. We have 2 tenths. We go on our number line, we get to 2 tenths, but it's more than that. In fact, it's halfway. 5 is halfway between 2 tenths and 3 tenths. So we're simply just going to put our little dot right there, and that represents 25 cents or 25 hundredths. All right. So now we can look down here. To be able to do this, we won't see a grid that only has tenths. We wouldn't see that because the bottom of our fraction, if we wrote this number as a fraction, we have to go with what it gives us last. That's not a 0 in the hundredths place. So we would put 100 on bottom because we go to the hundredths. How many pennies do we have here? 25 cents, 25 pennies. We would write our 25. So we couldn't have a grid with 10 blanks if we're dealing with 100. If we're dealing with hundredths, okay? So here we're looking at 25 hundredths. You guessed it. We can just fill in 25 of these boxes. Now, what's the easiest way to do it? The easiest way to do it is to know that each one of these rows has 10 blanks in it, 10 boxes. Each row is like a tenth. Just like over here, this entire row is a tenth. All right. So just like up here on our number line, each one of those is a tenth. So here we have 2 tenths with 25 cents. So I'm going to fill in 2 of these tenths. All right. So right here so far I've filled in 20 cents, but we have 25 cents. Now all you have to do is fill in 5 of these. 2, 3, 4, 5. There you go. Now we have filled in 25 out of the 100 blanks here on this grid. All right, brain break time. I know you guys are just enjoying this video so much. I'm just enjoying making it so much. Truly, I wish I was there hanging out with you guys to see the little light bulbs turn on and see you get these skills nav 100% correct, because that's what's going to happen today when we finish with this video. But let me tell you a little story about what I got from Mrs. Keith this week. You see this? You know what this is? This is a snowball. No, it's not a real snowball. It's a fake snowball. But it feels like a real snowball. Have you guys ever seen these before? Where'd you say these are at?
Target.
Target. She went to Target, this magical place, and she got these things.
That I bought those for the kids, not you, right?
She says she bought them for the kids, but they're for me, really. Because here's what's cool about these things. You squeeze them, they actually feel like snow. They're super light. Like I can throw them at my phone and there's nothing that happens. You jumped. I know you did. And I can throw these at the kids. It's amazing. They could be running around screaming and I just, boom, fly it in there. I've hit Truman in the face with this like 1,000 times. It doesn't hurt him. He doesn't care. It's soft. It's like fluffy. Like it's not a big deal at all. It's the coolest invention I've ever seen. And I want 1 million of them. And I would bring them to school and throw them at you guys if I thought you wouldn't steal them like you steal my pencils. Maybe I should bring a couple sometimes just to throw them at you, just to say I threw stuff at my students. Maybe. If you guys knock it out on Skills Navigator, maybe we can have a little snow fight sometime this week. But you got to prove that to me. Back to business. All right, next we're going to talk about fractions again. Now, you've heard me say several times that when I think about math, I think about food and money. Fractions are no different. In fact, fractions and teaching fractions, that's the reason that I always say those things, either food or money. And anytime the fraction on bottom is a 10 or a 100, I want you to think about dimes or pennies. We've worked on that a little bit, but let's go ahead and take a closer look. All right, so when we talk about fractions, I actually love fractions. There's a ton of things that we get to do with fractions that we will focus on next semester, but right now we're talking about decimals, okay? So how do decimals relate to fractions? It's actually super easy. Like we've talked about, when you see fractions, you're either going to see a 10 or 100 on the bottom. What are these? Say it with me. Dimes. Tenths mean dimes. What we see over here? Hundredths. Hundredths mean pennies. So when we talk about a decimal, we can see something like this, and we know that the place value is hundredths here and tenths there. Okay? So here that we have both the tenths and the hundredths, we need to find a fraction that has the hundredths, okay? So here we can use this. We can say 43 hundredths right here. We can say that because we have 100 pennies. Here we have 43 pennies, 43 cents. Here we have 43 pennies. See how those are the same? We could not use tens down here. We couldn't use tenths because we have more than just 4 tenths, right? We can't put 43 tenths up there. That'd be too big. We have to recognize that here we're dealing with hundredths, so we need to deal with hundredths in our fraction, all right? So 43 hundredths equals 43 hundredths. Now, that could change a little bit when we use dimes. If we have 0.6 here, we have the tenths. That's as far as we go. So we need tenths, right? How many tenths do we have? We have 6 tenths. Very simple. However, I've trained you to use your brain to think about math. So really, we have 60 cents, right? Now, we go to the hundredths place, right? Okay, so this is actually also equal to, 6 dimes is also equal to 60 pennies, or 60 hundredths. You can write it 2 different ways. But every time you see a decimal like this, when you're talking money, you can always turn decimals into fractions when you're talking about tenths or hundredths. And lastly, we're going to talk about comparing decimals. And just like I said last week, when you're comparing or when you're writing down decimals ever, always think about money. Always think about money. And when you're comparing decimals, I want you to think, would I rather have this much money or would I rather have this much money? If you can put the dollar signs in there in your head, you very quickly can recognize which one is greater, which one is less. Let's go ahead and take a look. When it comes to comparing decimals, I feel like that is just something that's super duper easy to do if you can do one thing. Right here it is. When I say make your blanks, we're going to do exactly that. We're going to make our blanks. And it's easy to think about this when you compare it to money, right? Always is. So if I were to give you 2 decimals, if I were to say, what is bigger between 88 hundredths and 9 tenths? Okay, if I give you these 2 decimals, I immediately want you to make these blanks right here. You know that there's a 0 here because it's written there. But you also know that if there's nothing out here, the same as nothing is what? I'm waiting. The same as nothing is what? You're right, 0. Okay, so you could put a 0 there, all right? You know that's fine. Here, you see 88 goes up here. 8, 8. Here, you see 9 goes there. What goes there? What is the same as nothing? Exactly, 0. Put a little 0 right there. And when we compare these numbers, just like when we're comparing whole numbers, we want to start at the left. This decimal, we got to make sure we line our decimal points up. That's the most important rule, all right? We're going to start at the left. 0 is the same. 0 is the same. Are 8 and 9 the same? No. 9 is bigger. This number is bigger. That's how you compare decimals. All right, guys, I don't call myself the best math teacher in the world because I'm so good looking, all right? When I call myself the best math teacher in the world, it's because I'm good at helping kids learn things and making sure that they do. I'm not there today. This is a team between you and I. It's on you right now. When I give you these skills navigators here in a couple minutes, you need to focus on them. Make sure you try your best. Work them out on paper. Your substitute teacher is going to pass out a piece of paper right now. You should have a pencil and you should get started right away. Do the skills navigator quiz that says decimals ain't nothing, because that's true. Decimals ain't nothing. Make sure you work them out. Focus. Make today a good day of work. Help me out. I hate not being there, okay? But in order for us to grow the most, for me to be the best, for you to grow the most, for that to happen, I need your best work right now. Go ahead and get started on the skills navigator quiz that says decimals ain't nothing, because they're not.